Is it still? Okay, cool. Like I heard Zoom go recording in progress, and I was like, huh? Okay. Hi.
Prepare to be assimilated. Yes,
That's
hello.
exact. I was like, GLaDOS, is that you? I am Brianna Lawrence, fandom editor over at the Mary Sue, pronouns she and her, and I am here with.
You are here with Sean Chiplock. I go by Sonic Mega Online. My pronouns are the same as my amateur nouns. They are he, him. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for making the time for me.
Oh, thank you for talking to me about Tokyo Revengers, the anime series that I did not expect to get super hooked on, but
Yeah.
here we are.
It's been a fun series for me to watch. I'll admit, most
Yeah.
of the time I only watch the episodes that I'm about to be recording for, so I'm
Okay.
ready ahead of time, but I don't spoil myself too much in what transpires in the series. So
Got it.
it's held my interest so far. I'm
Yeah.
a couple head theories I've got that I want to see what
Oh my
happens.
gosh, there's there's so many theories you could have with this series, and I didn't look up anything before I started watching it, and I was like, time travel. Oh no. Oh
Right.
gosh, time travel. That recipe for disaster immediately. So you play Draken in the series, correct?
I do. Yes.
Yes, that's awesome. I
Ken
love Draken.
Draken Ryuguji.
Yes, the mature member of the of Toman compared to his boss, I should say.
Yes.
Um, so first things first, the icebreaker question: what got you into anime and later voice acting?
Well, as for what got me into anime, I don't know if I could give a specific answer to that. Like, I've always been someone who's had a very high natural level of energy, and I've always been very much a visual learner, or at least a
Mm,
kinesthetic learner. So it just feels like a recipe to automatically fall in love with anime. You know, it's very
yeah.
high energy a lot of times. There's subtle nuanced anime like Ghost in the Shell, but when we're talking about the stuff that I would see on TV, you're
Yeah.
talking Pokemon, you're talking Dragon Ball Z, all the high octane stuff. Um,
Exactly. I agree.
it's very colorful, it's very vivacious, and so I'm not even surprised that I ended up, between that and my love of video games, that was
Oh
the
yeah, you were
that I
destined to be an anime fan.
right. As for voice acting, Boredom and Neopets are actually the main
Really?
characters. Oh yes, oh yes. Back during elementary, middle, high school, I've always been a night owl. I've always stayed up super late. Like most of the time, my bedtime's between like 2 and 4 in the morning.
Is that still the case?
Now that I'm no longer in my teens, there's been some evenings where I pass out at like 1:30, but like for example, last night I crawled into bed at about 2:30, and then the evening before that I came to bed at like 5:15. So
AM?
AM.
Oh
AM.
my goodness.
Yes. But a lot of the times on school nights, I wouldn't want to go to bed yet because I put off my homework and I hadn't done it yet. So I would end up staying up and listening to Adult Swim in the background while I would end up doing
Mm,
my dailies on websites like Neopets. And it was one of those evenings where while I was, I'd finished my stuff on Neopets, but I was still bored. And so I ended up going to Adult Swim's website, which they were plugging very frequently back in the day. And just from browsing around, I ended up discovering this behind the scenes video of Troy Baker
oh.
as Abel Nightroad, and it was showing like the recording process for the episode that they were working on. And that was the first time that I'd ever seen the actual process of voice acting and like
Oh
seen
yeah.
someone talking at the exact same time the character's lips were moving. And that's what like clicked everything together, and that's what like lit the light bulb up in my brain. And even though I still didn't fully understand like what this thing was that I had just witnessed, it was the first time in my life that something had grabbed my interest, not because it was my parents going, we signed you up for this, or my friends
Oh
going, you should try
yeah,
this out.
yeah.
It was something that I had a genuine desire to learn more about, and I was like, okay, well, if it really interests you that much, then commit to it, stick to it. And so before I knew it, I had this very, very basic desktop microphone. I was using Windows Sound Recorder to record like mini skits and stuff like that. And it all went uphill from there. So
That's awesome. Especially the part where you're like, this is a first interest I had that wasn't
yeah,
someone else telling me what to do or be interested in.
I
So
jokingly, lovingly referred to it as Stockholm Syndrome because no, because like even when stuff is really tough, I can't bring myself to even fathom not doing voiceover. I'm gonna be I'm gonna be dead before I get bored of VO at this rate.
That's awesome. It's nice to be that passionate about what you're doing. That's amazing. So now that we know about your anime history, your voice acting history, we're going to start talking about the series.
Okay.
Tillman seems to have this idea of what makes a good delinquent. Like when Mikey and Draken shut down the Fight Club, and when Draken praised Takemichi for standing up to him in order to protect Hina. What to you makes a good delinquent? Is there such a thing as a good delinquent?
So I guess in order for us to answer what makes a good delinquent, or if there is such a thing as a good delinquent, we have to ask ourselves, well, what makes a delinquent? Like, is a delinquent someone who does something that's illegal? Is a delinquent someone who does something that in the eyes of their society is seen as going against the norm? Because there are plenty of cases where, you know, people do things that society may be like, oh, you know, you shouldn't do that, you know, don't rock the boat too much, but they're not necessarily bad things. They're just, they go against the grain. And one of the moments in the series that I've already recorded for that I really appreciated was when Draken is in the hospital, and you know they've just faced off against the parents of that girl who got assaulted, and Draken is literally speaking to, you know, his boss and saying, listen, now is not the time to be a badass. You need to respect the fact that what we're doing here affected other people besides ourselves.
Innocent people,
innocent people. And so there's clearly that era of, you know, we're here to mess around and find out, but that doesn't mean other people need to find out because of us messing around. And so I do think there is such a thing as a good delinquent under that description. If a delinquent is simply anyone who rebukes some of the norms of society, is like, you know, I don't want to follow this dress code, or, you know, I don't want to spend 3 hours after my work shift drinking with my employees. I want to just go back home. You know, I want to do my own thing. You know, if that's what makes you a delinquent, then there's still a way to act as a delinquent and have a code of ethics, you know, have a set.
They very much have one too, it feels like.
So
like, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's part of why I find Tokyo Revengers interesting, is because I mentioned this in a different interview about the series, but it's so easy to look at the concept of the mafia or the Yakuza as like an easy access to a group of antagonists. You know, they're scary, they're intimidating, they do bad things because they are bad people. But there's also the side to a mafia or a Yakuza where it's a group of people that have come together under similar interests. It's just that those interests are not seen as acceptable in the eyes of society.
Yeah.
So that automatically makes them a group of delinquents. You know, like, what is the difference between a group of people that you like to go to the movies together and a group of people that like making really, really nice looking art that's also graffiti on the side of a brick wall? You know,
right.
I'm sure we in real life have all kinds of discussions of what is the difference between, you know, graffiti and wall art. Like, is there an actual dividing line on whether it's accepted or not? So, you know, I think it's totally possible.
Yeah, because like I remember Takemichi goes back and Naoto's like, this is the most evil gang you'll ever see in your entire life, and they did all these bad things. And he goes back and like the first thing they do is they shut down a fight club. They're like, this is not what we want to do at all. This is the exact opposite of what we stand for. Stop this right now. And it's just over.
Right. And it makes you wonder, like, are most of these actually bad people, or are they people that were put into bad situations?
Yeah, they're just like misunderstood people.
And they had to make a choice.
Yeah. And then like, you know, they come to the school and Takemichi's like, I'm not going to go with you. And Hina's all worried. And Mikey's like, I would never hit a girl. Why are you so worried about it? And it's just like, oh, wow. And they're like, yeah, that's not us. That's not our MO. And I remember he like goes back to the future. And now it's just like, what do you mean they're not evil? Like, they're evil in the future. It's like, yeah, but in the past, they're just a bunch of kids just like hanging out. So yeah, I agree with you. I think there is such thing as a good delinquent. And I think this show plays with that very well, because like the person got assaulted and the first thing Draken thought of doing was going to visit the hospital, and they just bowed their heads, and he's like, don't say anything.
Right.
You say nothing right now. They're suffering and you have to take it.
Yeah.
And Mikey's like, you're right. And I'm like, wow.
That was the moment he was like, you're right. I was like, yo,
right. Like, because up until that point, our whole depiction is like, these are evil people who are going to ruin your life in the future. And Mikey's just like, you're absolutely right. And even Takemichi's like, oh, I came at this completely wrong.
He's like, I'm not a delinquent. And Draken's like, shut up, you delinquent. He goes, Mikey.
Exactly. Oh, that's a good lead into my next question, which is about Draken specifically. Draken, despite all badass appearances, seems to be a rather mature guy who cares about the people around him. On top of having a strong bond with Mikey and the gang, he's the one who visits the hospital, like we were talking about. What's it like playing someone who goes from being so threatening to being so caring?
So it was a little bit easier for me than you might imagine, in part because of one of the characters I previously played that served as like a vocal foundation for Draken, which was Guido Mista from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind. Because Guido is, or Mista is pretty much the same way. He is extremely loyal to Giorno, and he's very loyal to the team in general. But there are absolutely those times where he's got the upper hand against the people that they're fighting against, and he lets his mafioso side take over, and he gets like super cocky and super confident. You know, I think of the bobble-headed turd burglar scene when the dude's head is trapped in the ship. But he is able to play both simultaneously. And so when I was approaching Draken vocally, I was saying, okay, well, he's similar to Mista in that he's kind of in that lower register, but he's not as intense as Mista is. You know, he tends to be more stoic most of the time.
He is for real. Like, he's very quiet and
right. Well, you know, there's that saying that like the people who are most often the quietest are the people you don't want to piss off. Like,
right.
Because when they actually need to raise their voice, it comes at you. It's unexpected.
Exactly.
And so that's, you know, I feel that Draken is absolutely the same way, where, you know, I'll have to find out more about his past, but for whatever reason, you know, he takes this whole Manji gang thing more seriously. He's like, we're here to do things, but that doesn't mean outside of those missions that we can just mess around. I need to make sure I stay alive. I need to make sure our other gang members stay alive. I need to make sure that we don't lose sight of what our focus is on. And so that's part of like keeping himself calm and composed and focused. And in fact, where a lot of his intimidation factor comes in, because in contrast to all these other members that can, you know, hoot and holler, he's the one that's like, his eyes are always on some fixed point. Like wherever he's looking, you'd better be looking in that general direction if you don't want to get your poop pushed in.
Good way to put it.
But when the chips are down, the man is able to bring like this ferocity from his gut out. There's another scene, the scene where I don't think we discussed it yet, but there's the scene where Pa basically ends up getting himself sent to prison.
Yes.
And that whole scene, right after they kick the leader's butt, like Draken goes from like 20 to 120. Like he bellows out to like all of the followers of the other gang, like, where the hell do you think you're going?
Come get your leader. Yeah.
Right, come get your leader. Here's the reason why you lost. And I am particularly proud of like the guttural growl that I was able to put into that shot.
I can't wait for that episode.
When people see that episode and they hear me do that performance as Draken, they'll be like, they'll listen to this interview and listen to my voice the way it sounds right now and be like,
is that the same person?
That's not him. That's not him. I'm sorry. No, that's not. They got
I was
like
hoping
Jameson
you got
Price
that far,
or something.
that episode, like, and the whole Pa situation, and that's when I realized that these kids have a strong code of ethics, because it's like, they're like, why would you bring a knife? And like, why would you stab this person?
Why would you bring a knife to a knife fight?
Right. And they're just like, you're not supposed to bring weapons and violence to this violent act. And I'm like, oh, I guess they're right. And Pa's like, I'm just gonna let myself get turned in, and Draken respects that.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I expected more like pushback, and he's like, no, this is what he wants, so this is what we're doing. And I remember I was very stressed, because like I thought Draken was gonna get hurt. Like the whole thing is like, Draken can't die, so we have to keep him alive. And I'm like, God, this is the moment. And Draken like fights back, and he's like, let me tell you why you lost. Like, like, oh, okay. And he just breaks it down. And yeah, exactly. I can't wait to hear you do that episode, because that's a really good Draken moment, I think. And that's like that's when him and Mikey like disagree, but Draken's like, this is what he wants, and like the concept of accountability from characters who are like 15 is amazing. Like, oh, they already know that you should hold people accountable for their actions.
Exactly.
That actually goes into my, I guess I did send the questions ahead of time. So it's like that goes into my next question.
There you go.
Draken has had to make some pretty tough decisions. Like not getting Pa out of jail after he turned himself in. Do you think this was the right move to make? And it sounds like you do.
I identify with Draken in this way because, like, you started to bring this up during the previous answer, but it was like, you know, Draken recognizes that Pa had made a choice for himself, and he respects it, I imagine, in part because he's the kind of person that goes, I think very carefully about what course of action I'm going to take and what possible consequences it could have.
Right.
So, like, he recognizes that Pa made this choice, and then when Pa recognizes, hey, this is going to result in this happening to me, Draken goes, yep. Okay. Yeah. Like, he's not gonna fight it. He's not gonna be like, oh, no, like we're not gonna let this happen to you. He goes, all right, as long as you're aware that this is the consequence of your actions.
And Pa is okay with it too.
He's and like, I honestly admire that. I don't admire what he did, but I admire that he did it and then went, okay, well, I got to do what I wanted to do, so now it's time for me to deal with the repercussions of getting to do that. So yeah, I have no complaints about that.
Yeah, I understand the difference of opinion between Mikey and Draken with that moment, but I'm also very big on, like, if you do something wrong, you should be held accountable for your actions. Even if this person did like a tremendously bad thing to lead to him getting stabbed by Pa, it's also like this level of, they're like, this is the one thing you can't do. Like, you can't actually like try and murder this person, even if we're a group of delinquents.
Right.
That's like, there's like a line that you can't cross, and Pa crossed the line, and Draken's like, you good?
Damn it,
and
Pa,
like,
I said you're a nice guy. A nice guy.
I was so surprised, and Pa just stood there, and Draken's like, all right, we gotta go. It's like, this is what Pa wants, respecting it.
All right, bye.
And they leave. So next question. If you could go back 12 years to the past, would you change anything? If so, what would it be? If not, why would you leave it as is?
I'm definitely one of those people that, like, as part of my self-reflection, realizes how often things are the way they are now because of a bunch of smaller events happening the way that they did over the course of time. The big one that I mentioned is like how I ended up married to the wonderful woman that's my wife now. You know, it honestly all started with a scholarship competition because I was coming out of high school and I entered into this medallion scholarship competition and was one of the people who was selected. It was their highest academic scholarship. And that scholarship was the reason that I was even able to afford attending a specific university. Had I not gotten that scholarship, I would have had to go to a different university. Well, going to that university is what allowed me access to one of the on-campus like student performance groups that I decided to audition for. And I did it all 4 years. But after the first 2 years, I could have decided, you know what? I'm not interested in this anymore and just not done it. But I went the third year, and that's what led to me meeting the woman who would eventually become my wife, who almost didn't go to that audition because she wasn't feeling it, and her mother pressured her into going.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks, my wife's mother, for forcing her to show up and having us meet for the first time. And then even then, after the first year of college, if we jump back a little bit, after the first year of college, I had won the voice acting competition AX Idol that Bang Zoom was hosting. And they asked when I was going to be in the area so that I could do like a general demo and get my prize audition and stuff like that. And I was still in college in Michigan while Bang Zoom was in California. So at one point I had to make this choice of, do I want to drop everything and stop my college education and move out to California early? Because now you have to understand, you know, it seems like a dumb idea in retrospect, but back then, as someone who was trying to get into voice acting and anime, like this was the big, right. It's relatively small in the grand scheme of things now, but back then, obviously it felt much different. And I had to make a choice, and ultimately I decided to stay at college and finish out because I had that scholarship paying for so much of it. And if I left and I came back to try and do college later on in life, I wouldn't have that scholarship. I'd have to pay all of it out of my own pocket. So that was also part of the decision that went into being in the right place at the right time to end up meeting her. And that's just one factor of my life. That's not anything relating to like my career. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think about how I got started down the road of voice acting and all the help I got from my mentor that probably had a significant influence on my passion staying as focused as it was and me being able to learn as much as I did in a short span of time. So are there things from, you know, up to 12 years ago that I wish I had done differently in terms of, oh, you know, I wish the first time around that this had gone differently? Sure. But at the same time, there's that part of me that's like, well, what if that had the butterfly effect? What if that had
Right.
unexpected ramifications? Even if we're talking about, you know, additional positive benefits, what if the influence of those positive outcomes affected what I did with my
Mm-hmm.
life and caused other things to not happen in the first place? So that's really, at the end of the day, I don't think I would change anything. And that's part of
Yeah.
why in the present day, what I tell myself is just focus on doing the best job that you can do with every opportunity that you're given. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, even if there were second chances, I don't know if I would want to take them. So, and
That's
that just
awesome.
that just means I have to do my best to do everything as well as I can the first time around.
Yeah, my wife actually has the exact same viewpoint, like word for word almost. Like even like the negative things that's happened, she's like, but it affected the outcome today. And I don't know if I went back and changed like the negative, if it would like trickle down and make
Right.
this change into like a more positive or an even bigger negative and
Yep.
whatnot. And every little thing changes everything. So she says the exact same thing when this question comes up. And she's like, no, I wouldn't change a thing. Even the bad parts, I would leave it because I might need those to get to the good part I'm at now.
Absolutely.
So we are at the final question. Uh, what are you looking forward to with the rest of Tokyo Revengers this season?
Man. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like I'm one of those people who like if I'm already invested in a show, I kind of just want to turn my brain off and just let the story
Hmm.
be told to me. I don't want to try and guess what happens and then ruin it for myself
Oh,
later
that's
on.
hard. That's
Right?
so hard.
I don't know. I don't if I had to throw a crackpot theory out there, because I think what is the thing that we're so far in at this point that I don't remember the core aspect because of all this time travel. What is Takemichi's main goal? He's traveling through time to prevent what? The death of
To
Hina?
prevent Hina dying, but now it's his friend Akun. He doesn't want him to die
Right.
and then now he's getting attached to Toman, so I'm imagining he doesn't want any of them to die. And
I
I, I actually, when we were watching, and I think we were watching the third episode, and I was like, what if this affects it in a way that the people close to him, like besides Hina, die? And then the fourth episode happens and Akun dies. And I'm like, oh, so it's like I don't know if this could ever end perfectly
I don't know.
ever because it's time travel.
I'm gonna
So
like find out. We're probably gonna find out that like Hina surviving causes pretty much everyone else in the Tokyo Manji
I
gang to
know I'm
die,
so scared that's gonna be what
and then he's gonna
happens.
he's gonna have to decide whether to like wipe out the gang or let Hina die in the present day. And I don't even know what you do with that. Like, part of me wants to
Yeah.
say, oh, I'm sure Ken and Manjiro are gonna make some big damn heroic sacrifice and say, listen, this is the life that we chose.
Oh
So
my
if this is
god.
how we meet our end, then that's how it is. That's what it means to be a delinquent. It means you live by your own
No,
rules.
no.
Right?
Oh
Right?
no. I don't like that.
You know exactly what I'm getting at
No.
now. They're like, live by the code, die by the code.
Oh god,
Well,
that makes so much
and
sense.
and then
Oh,
Ken is gonna like hold Takemichi up by his scruff and say, listen here.
you go be with that girl.
No. He'll say you go be with that girl, but he's gonna say, don't waste this. He's gonna say,
No.
you better
Oh,
treat that girl the same way all of us would treat each other. Don't make us regret doing this. And
I
then they
don't.
all die, and Hina,
Ah,
and he's like, I'm gonna become the best delinquent ever, and I'm gonna live in the footsteps of those who died so that she could live.
I don't like that headcanon, but it also makes so much sense. This is like a series where I can't predict what happens because I didn't think that he was going to go back to the future and then back to the past and keep jumping back and forth. And
Right.
I'm like, oh God, no.
No. You know what's even worse?
Don't, no, you know what? Interview over.
No. So, Takemichi says, I will do anything to make sure Hina survives, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is included when you say I would do anything?
Like, you would die for her.
Yes.
Oh, oh. I don't think this is a series where everyone's gonna live happily. I think someone has to die.
I think it'll be either all the major members of the Tokyo Manji gang, or it's going to be Takemichi himself.
Oh, that's the only way she can live. Oh, great. That's such a depressing note to end up. But I have the same thought. I'm like, this is a series where the stakes are so high. Like, you can't do this in a way where everyone's gonna walk away and everything will be okay. That's not,
Right.
and that's usually not how time travel works. So, wow. Well, on that positive note, oh my god, I'm gonna tell my wife about that, and she's gonna be like, "Yep." Well, thank you so much for the interview and for your thoughts on the series and making me very sad for the rest of the day. But that's fine. That's what we do here.
Sorry.
No, are you really sorry? I don't think
No.